Hey, welcome back to Jamieson's Repair Shop. Alright, so it's the end of September and we've had some phenomenal weather. It's very unusual for this area to have 30-degree Celsius weather. Yesterday that's what it was, on the 28th of September. Usually we're talking maybe even 20 below by this time Celsius. But anyway, in the last video, I mentioned that I was going to set up a shelter logic, and I have set it up, but not where I told you. Where the ranchero is sitting is where I meant to do it, and the prairie dory's over there as well. So let's have a walk out, and I'll talk a little bit about the shelter logic, and I'll show you what I'm doing in it, and why I put it where it is. So never mind the mess, because that's part of what's going on here. And some of you T-Bird guys, you'll recognize seats out of a T-Bird. Rear package tray, air breather. That's not from a T-Bird, that's a 289. It was in the thing, in the old T-Bird. Whole bunch of parts. My wife has been stripping these parts out. There's wire harnesses over there, and you'll see over here engine hood and trunk lid, and there's some panels, just scrap. And over here are the doors, and there's the radiator cover, and there's the two front springs, so you know I have the springs out already. I've got the hinges off, front spindles and rotors and calipers. So what's going on inside the tent, I got my engine lift here as I'm getting ready to pull the engine out of this rig. Engine transmission, but first I want to pull the bumper out. The red just has 2 bolts left holding it. I've got it disconnected. Fan will have to come off. Disconnect the torque converter from the engine. I'm going to try to pull the whole thing out at once, but I want that torque converter disconnected in case I run into trouble, because I don't want to have to go underneath and work on it. So anyway, before we get into what's going on with the car, I'll talk a little bit about the shelter logic. So this is the one I bought, and it's 24, 12 by 8 high, 12 wide, 24. It's the not a heavy duty one, so it's a relatively thin skin, but I suspect it'll last a couple of years anyway, and you can rebuy the replacement skins heavier than that right from Shelter Logic. So that's what I'm told. Now this went together quite well, actually. The kids came out, there was 4 of us working on the frame, and it was so windy we didn't bother putting up the skin that day. So the day that we put the frame together, I'm just going to estimate we spent like 2.5 hours, you know, just assembling it and getting it stood up and in place. And I did it right over the car, so we did it segments, and then we would build the segments and move the whole thing back. So it was good having 4 people, because the young fellow and I, he's as big as I am, and we were able to lift, and my daughter and wife helped as well. So we were able to lift it back in segments over the car, and then the next day when the wind was less, my wife and I skinned it, just 2 of us. Easy to do. One suggestion, if you're going to do this, don't try to throw it up without these rails in. So these rails are on, these side supports, they are already on before you start, but the bottom ones aren't. So what I did, I went ahead and put the tubes in the spots, and I put those clamps on, but not around here, and they were just out on the ground on both sides. And when we went to pull it over, we were able to tie a rope in 2 locations. Sorry, one about here and one back there, mid rail on both of them, I guess, right about there and back there. And 2 of us were easily pulled it over the top. Not a problem at all. I really like that these clamps are like the way they are. They clamp from both sides, so you could just finger tight them, and then when you're ready to tighten up, you just push down on it and then give them a tighten, and they hold there. So that was nice. And another thing about putting them in ready to go was that the bolts and everything are already there in place when you're ready to clamp them on. So if it's a bit windy or something, you can just do one at a time, clamp them on quick and hold it down. Now the anchors for this one, there's 4 anchors on each side. So there's one at the front, and then there's every second has an anchor, and then one at the back. So these anchors here are screw-in type anchors. So they have a big round plate that screw in. If you've done anchors, you'll know which ones I'm talking about. But when I watched videos on this, they were always the fish hook type where you drive them down to the post and it just put pressure upward. But these are actually screw-in ones. And it took me about a half hour by hand to put all those in. So it's a bit of a time-consuming thing. But overall, I like the shelter. It gets hot in here. So there's no flow-through ventilation, which I guess you could put one in. You could put a fan in and build a frame and put it in. That's fine. Or hang a fan and let air move. That's no problem. You could just hang a fan from the back and let it pull and push air. And I may do that because I have 2 box fans inside. And I think I will actually. I might set a fan right up on top of here and keep the air moving. It'll be cooler in here. And I can see with these rigs, and I'm not knocking the shelter logic at all. I think so far I'm very pleased with it, is that you could see sweating happening if you're in a humid environment. Now it's very dry out here in Saskatchewan where I live. It's like a desert almost, right now especially, because normally we would have had cooler weather, but it's hot and dry right now. So there's not a bit of moisture on it. But if you're in a humid area, you might want to look at other ways to keep the moisture down. I saw a couple of people had put a tarp in and stuff like that. They put tarps on the ground. I seen one couple put tarps on the ground to keep the moisture coming up into the thing. So there's other ways you could possibly do it. But for me, a vent fan would be helpful. And I'm going to set up a box fan in here to keep the air moving because it's going to get hot. It's supposed to be up to almost 30 degrees again today on the 29th of September. And it will be hot in here if I don't do something. So I'll grab one of those box fans and get it going. And then back to the old Thunderbird. So I'm going to take the bumper off first, rad out like I said, and I'll work on the engine and transmission from there. My wife's going to come in and start taking this rest of this trim off. We're saving as much of this car as we can. All the trim, the Landau, like the little side panel, sail panel, decorative stuff. She has to take this off. And then all the interior will come out, but I'll end up cutting a lot of that because there's nothing holding this car together. This car is in very, very bad condition. So I did take the inner fender out through the last fall when I needed the parts. But you can see why I say there's not much holding this car together. This car, right from the firewall back underneath, is completely rusted out. No way you would fix this, even for me. And I don't mind rust, but there's no way this car would ever be fixed. There's just nothing holding it together anymore. So it's a donor car, and that's what it was bought for. Even these, like, they're not even any sense in saving that stuff. I'll save the hardware out of it and all that kind of thing, and all the bolts, original bolts. But there's just nothing in this car. And the bumper is one of the big reasons I bought this car, was for the bumper and the front fender on the right side. But you can see here, it's just garbage. And I didn't do any work over here, and this is what it looks like. The only thing holding this together is the fuel filler, I think, going into the gas tank. So we salvaged the trim on this side, the back, the vent trim. I want to pull this all out, salvage this. So basically salvage everything that has possible value or reuse to my own vehicle. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. So I need to get this out of here. So we want this for storage for Thunderbird parts inside. So that's what I'm going to tackle today. And we'll get this bumper off and engine out first. All right, hang in there. We'll get it done. It's enough talking. You're tired of hearing me talking. All right, I got my fan set up. It's already made a difference. I can feel the air moving, and that's really all I'm after, is just the air moving. It'll be as hot as it's going to be, but it feels a lot better already. So I'm going to set up to take this bumper off, and I'll put it on time lapse, because you don't need to watch me in real time. So I'll time lapse this, and I'll end up time lapsing, unless I have something else to say throughout the whole video, will be time lapse on how to tear this car, on tearing this car apart. It's not a tutorial, it's just showing me tearing it apart. So if it's in time lapse, it shouldn't be too boring, but I may stop every now and then and talk about something. We'll get as far as we can with it. Alright, I'm taking the torque converter nuts off, and what a mess. I don't know, some people shouldn't be allowed to work on vehicles. They've got the heads of the torque converter nuts chewed right up. So I'm bringing my wife out. She's going to hold the crankshaft with the strong bar, the breaker bar rather, and the nut and the socket. And I'm going to go back underneath with a 6-point. What a mess those are in. And on tight, which I understand that. But holy moly, you don't need to strip them when you're putting them back on. Alright, so let's get back at her. Alright, there it is. The engine's out. It looks like it was probably a reconditioned torque converter in it at one time. Maybe the whole transmission likely was new. This is the one I wanted to use in the convertible. This transmission felt really nice when I was moving it around. So, and that explains why it did feel nice. It's like the rebuild and in pretty good shape. And you can see, it looks like possibly they had fixed the bell housing on this transmission, but I have another one. But I mean, obviously it works, it's holding it together, but it looks like it was welded and then ground out. And there's the old engine. This is the engine I didn't know really what it is. I just kind of hung on to it because it was a really nice sounding engine. But I'm going to take some of the stuff off and see if I can get more data on it. This is the one that had the ribs on it. And if I can spin it around again, you can see the date code on it. Maybe we can. It's up underneath the oil filter. I believe this one was the one that had the indicated it was either a 71 or a 61, but I'm not sure. It was an odd number, but I have it, and I'll put it up in a picture. I have a picture of the number. Anybody that remembers the first video on this engine, so you can see all the ribs, and it could be an early 1960s engine, or it could be just a crate engine, like a service engine. I believe the service engines came with those ribs. But there aren't any other markings on it than there's one right here, the castings, and now those are the mold numbers, I believe. But underneath here there's a casting number. Anyway, we'll get back to pulling this apart. But this is a good solid engine, and I wanted to keep it for that reason. I don't know how much work will need to go into the engine that came out of the convertible. And this one worked really nice. So we're going to keep this engine, possibly for the convertible, and that transmission definitely will be going in the convertible. Alright, so let's get back at it. We'll get the transmission out, and I'll call it for this video once I get that tranny out. And you noticed I put the jack in, just in case anybody's wondering what I was doing there. I put the jack in between the legs of the engine lift, and that's in case I needed to jack up this front of the car, take the stands out and lower it to clear this, but I had no trouble getting it out. There was lots of height inside the tent here, so I didn't really have to use that. But I have a mess here now I need to clean up. My wife's furious with me. She's walking in this antifreeze. I gotta get it cleaned up. It's a mess. And the more you walk in this stuff, the more you're gonna have it spread around the countryside. So let's get it cleaned up, because it's not good for animals either. And we do have a nice black cat that comes through here and looks after our mice for us, so we don't want to kill the cat. All right, I'll get back to you when I'm started on the transmission. All right, there it is. I'm running out of battery on the phone here, but the transmission's out, engine's out, and it's getting too hot out here now. It's up to almost 30 degrees again, and I got a lot of cleanup to do in this area before I do much else. So I'm going to get this transmission, the torque converter held in. I'll wire it in so I can stand it on end so I don't leak out transmission fluid everywhere. And next video, we'll start cutting this baby up. So that'll be interesting to some and pretty boring to others. The same as this was, interesting to some and boring to others. However, it is what it is, and we're getting her done. There's the engine, and once all that carcass is gone, all this body is all hauled away and salvaged, I'll be putting the engine and stuff back in here, engine, transmission, and some other ones from the other cars. All right, that's it. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe while you're at it.